I have a bone to pick with you. My saboteurs. I embarked on a journey over the past couple of weeks to read your favorite books of 2022. I put forth a form that I have included in the description of a few different videos over the past couple of months, asking you, hey, what were your favorite books of 2022? And I did this last year and got such a great response. I got so many books that I probably wouldn't have picked up otherwise. And when I picked them up, I realized so many of these books were awesome. I found a sci-fi book that I gave 5 stars to. It was such a fun experience. However, this year was a different beast altogether and entirely. I have read all 10 of your best books of 2022. To say it was a challenge and a struggle would be putting it lightly. So don't go into this video expecting me to smile and giggle and find some 5-star reads. There was a 5-star read, I will admit, but this was interesting. This was an interesting challenge and it did not go in the way that I planned. That being said, I think it's an interesting video. I think that you will maybe gain something from it. Maybe you won't. But I read the 10 most popular books as voted by y'all for 2022. Not all of these books were published last year, but these were books that people read last year and absolutely loved. Some books I agreed with and a lot I didn't. So if you are interested in seeing my thoughts and feelings on any of these books, feel free to watch this video. Like I said, didn't go how I wanted it to. I'll be leaving timestamps in the description of this video so you can kind of skip around. I don't think I spoiled any of the books, but you know, if you are someone who's sensitive to that kind of thing, feel free to kind of skip around, but let's get into it. I'm in a spicy mood. Rewatched my last year's reading y'all's favorite books video, and that one went really, really well. Sadly, this one is not going as well. I am starting out with The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston, 50% in, and I don't like this book. I'm having a hard time like putting words to what is not working, but I think it really comes down to the fact that this book is not a romance that I'm enjoying. I am very particular. I don't really like a story that for the first 50% is largely just about our heroine like walking through life and figuring things out. She's not necessarily growing a ton. She is just dealing with, I guess, the recent loss of her dad. So anyway, this book's about our main character, Florence, and she sees dead people. Her dad was the head dude at a funeral home. All of her family works at the funeral home, I'm pretty sure, except for her. She's in New York and she's a ghostwriter for a romance author, and she has a mental block and just can't seem to conjure a happy ending for this 4th book she needs to write. While she's dealing with this, she finds out that her father has passed away, and now she's back in her small town dealing with the repercussions, I guess, of having left that small town. She, you know, has like a history there. People weren't very nice to her, even though she like solved a murder or something like that back in the day. And she's also dealing with like the family dynamics because she's like, she has a bad relationship with her sister. I just don't like it. I really don't know like how else to say that. I just don't think this is my kind of story. It's not egregiously bad. It's not horrible. I think maybe an audiobook is not the way to do this book in general. I decided to quit the audiobook at the 50% mark, and instead I'm going to pick up the ebook for the last 50% and maybe reading it in my own voice. In my head, it will be a more enjoyable experience. Not that the narration is bad by any means, but I'm wondering if maybe it's just not translating via audiobook, but frankly, I don't think that's the case. I just am not vibing. And there's another book that I had to read in its entirety for this video, the allotted amount of time that I had the audiobook before it returned to the library. It's like I finished another book for this video, and it's the same situation for that one too. Like the vibes were just not it for me. It wasn't a terrible book. I'm sure that at another point in my life I might have enjoyed it, but like the vibes weren't there, and we'll talk about that one later. Probably like sprinkle it into like the midpoint of the video, because you know, ideally I would pick one book I don't like, one book I like, but you know, you can't predict these things when I'm told to like read books, right? Also, don't get me started on the fact that like the dog is the mayor of the town. I'm not liking it. I'm not charmed by the townspeople. I don't like the side characters. Really don't like the whole love interest being dead thing. It's simply not for me. So the vibes improved, but only nominally, and I honestly have no idea how to rate this book. So I finished Dead Romantics a couple of days ago, and I decided to like sit with my feelings and my thoughts and everything for a little bit just to see if things would firm up anymore, and they didn't. Reading this physically was definitely the way to go. I think picking up the latter half of this book on my Kindle was much more enjoyable than the audiobook. I think partially because the writing of the story is, for lack of a better word, corny. I think if you enjoy like a millennial sense of humor and you want some like haha moments in a book, like this could maybe work for you. And I think maybe the author was trying to like add levity to a story that would otherwise be, you know, kind of dark because it's about dead people. But I stand by what I said earlier in the last clip about this not being my kind of like romance. The more that I read the book and the more that I saw how things were playing out, I definitely predicted the ending of the book. So I mean, I guess good for me. But really, I think my issue was not that it was predictable, but it was that I think the things that were connecting the two characters, the hero and the heroine, were not things that I felt were substantial. I guess they both kind of liked books because he was an editor and she was not an editor, she's a writer. But when it comes to like actual life things, like obviously we got a lot of our heroine's background, we got to meet her family, we got to kind of understand the dynamic, we got to see her grieve for her dad, whatever, but we really didn't get much from the hero. Sure, we do find out like one or two things about his life, but I really didn't understand how these two were supposed to be a perfect match. I didn't really feel a ton of chemistry between the two of them. There was no puzzle pieciness. It was like our heroine would joke about coffee being her zoom juice, and he would bring that up later as like an inside joke, and the I love yous came too quickly. That being said, I think the grief component of this book was actually pretty good. I liked seeing our heroine kind of work through her grief, how the family came together. I feel like I did end up caring about the side characters more than I had expected. It kind of gave Schitt's Creek vibes, honestly, at the end there, but again, it was like nothing was really all that exciting. I'm so torn with this one, but honestly, I don't think anyone really cares so much about what my final rating is for this book because we have like 10 books to read. This first one not being great is not that big of a deal. I think I'm gonna leave it with a 3-star rating because I don't think this was terrible. Kind of understand why people like it. I honestly don't really understand why people like it. Idea, I guess, is cool. Like she sees dead people, but beyond that, I'm not understanding why this has like a universal love amongst my friends on Goodreads. You know, I'm gonna withhold my judgment and bitchy comments for once in my life. And I'm just gonna say it simply was not for me. I didn't hate it, but I like a romance where it's based on more than just like fleeting humor. Boo. This video is just not going to plan, which is so disappointing because it went so well last year. That being said, I didn't hate the Psalm for the Wild Bill, a Psalm for the Wild, but I think it's a Psalm for the Wild Bill. This book right here. Didn't hate it by any means, but I really wanted to like it more, especially considering some of the like one-liners or ideas that this book had. If you don't know, this is a novella in a series of novellas. I think there's just 2. It's about robots and humans, but also about finding your place in the universe, the meaning of life, kind of. I don't know. There's a lot of like big ideas in this book, but it also feels very cozy in a sense. So you have this person named Dex. They are, beginning of the story, kind of not totally happy with what they're doing in their life, living in a monastery, and it's definitely different from how we imagine monasteries today. Not as strict and doesn't have like the same sorts of like chastity rules, shall we say. But Dex is just feeling very unsatisfied with their life, and they think that the solution to this is to, I don't know, have a different profession or kind of figure something new out. So they decide that they're going to be a traveling tea person, so basically like brewing tea for people, and those people come to them and just kind of like talk and like commune with each other. You know, if you're having a bad day, you go get some tea, you talk to the person who's brewing the tea for you, and you just feel at peace. And I really like that concept. And so Dex kind of like travels from town to town with this wagon full of tea. They also like sleep in the wagon, I believe. It's like kind of technologically sophisticated, I guess. Along the way, they meet a robot and find out that in this world, robots used to have like specific tasks, kind of like we would imagine robots today. They would be working in factories or like on assembly lines, things like that, until one day there's like a robot uprising. They, I guess, gain some sort of sentience. They decide that they no longer want to be in these positions. They want to like live their own lives. And so the robots all kind of disappear from view, and they go to become kind of one with nature and to like explore. We have not seen the robots in, I think, like hundreds of years, until one day one of the robots comes out and is going to like rejoin society, learn more about the humans, and they come across Dex and they follow Dex around. They're like, oh, perfect. We're going to be traveling from place to place and I can learn more about the people and the world and stuff. So it's a delightful book about these conversations that Dex has with the robot named Moss. I will say there's like some really delightful little nuggets of wisdom in this novella. I really think, generally speaking, my issue and or like my review of this book is that I feel like it's just too short. I know that it's a novella and that there is another novella in this series. I think it's just one more. I could be wrong, but I like things that feel a little bit more well developed and more fleshed out. It's not that this was lacking in world building or development in terms of like what the story was. I just want more. I do not like novellas. That's not really my preferred form of reading, and especially since there's a second novella, why couldn't this have just been like one singular book? I really struggle because while there were profound moments, certainly, and while there are things that I'm definitely going to take away from this, especially the conversations around purpose, I don't think it went far enough. Almost, it's like if you're going to be a story that is going to, yes, out and out try to let people know kind of a moral message or something to kind of take away, I feel like go all the way there. It felt like there were just a couple of like beautiful throwaway lines, and I wanted there to be a little bit more. I feel like I'm sounding really critical. I did not hate this by any means, but I just wanted a touch a touch more. I think in terms of star rating, I would give this like a 3 or a 3.5. On Goodreads and in life, I don't really do half ratings, half star ratings, so I think I'm gonna leave it at a 3, which feels weird, but I kind of feel similarly about this book that I did with the Dead Romantics. It's like, by the end, I felt comforted. I felt like it was a fine reading experience, but it's not something that I would have picked up on my own. It's not a book that is going to have a deep, lasting impact on me, and overall, there's just like enough missing to where it couldn't possibly be a 4 or a 5-star read. So let's go ahead and talk about something else. You're going to be seeing a lot of this outfit from me today because it's a Saturday. I am reading a ton. I'm going to go ahead and talk to you about Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. Alright, so this is another book that I'm really struggling with, y'all. I don't want to keep struggling with books, but I also kind of think it's good for me to have bad books or books that I don't enjoy up front. I'm kind of like saving the ones I think I'm really going to like for later on in the video. Babel, Tomorrow, Funny Feelings, but that's neither here nor there. Let's talk about Lessons in Chemistry. So this book's about our main character, Elizabeth, and this book is set in the 50s and 60s, and she wants to be a really successful chemist. And we open up the story and we learn that that's just not really in the cards for Elizabeth. She ends up becoming a celebrity chef, I guess. Like, she becomes a chef on a television show, and it's about her making food for the masses. Like, this is the dinner that I would give my kid that's like nutritionally sound, blah, blah, blah. I guess a lot of people across the nation kind of watch this show. She's financially successful, and it's all because she has a kid that she decides to take this on instead of going on in the chemistry field. So we find all of this out at the very beginning of the story, and then we get flashbacks to kind of what led us here. The person that Elizabeth meets, kind of in a romantic sense, to, I guess, get her kid. She has sex with a guy, and they have a kid together. We learn about Elizabeth's time in, I believe, this lab called the Hastings Lab, where a lot of like famous scientists are kind of working together, doing research and things like that, and no one really respects her because she's a woman. She gets brutally sexually assaulted on page. I really struggle with historical fiction, and I think this is something that I say time and again, and I hate having to say it over and over again, but I don't understand why authors come to the subgenre to make women's lives miserable. And I understand that women's lives are far from perfect as it is right now in our kind of dystopian society. I know things were even worse back in the day for women, but I don't really want to read the graphic details of that. I don't pick up books to hope that eventually someone will have like a triumphant girl boss moment. Like, I am not excited about the prospect of seeing women suffer. It does not excite me. It does not feel hopeful for me. And I'm not saying that you are a bad person if you like this book or if these sorts of books really speak to you. I think there's something out there for everyone, and I definitely just, can understand why people enjoy stories like this because they are triumphant, but that's just not for me, simply. I would rather a book feel incredibly quiet and nothing happen and a woman not suffer. That's just how I am. I'm very aware of the way that women suffered back in the day. I mean, I'm a history major. That's very much something I've learned. Just don't like reading about it in a fiction setting. I just don't love it. That being said, like, there are things about this book that I'm liking. I appreciate the narrative. I appreciate the kind of bits of magic that are thrown in. Elizabeth has a dog with her partner, and the dog, I guess, like, understands English, even though he can't communicate. It's not a speaking dog, but he understands English, and we kind of get his inner thoughts, I guess, as well, because it's like this third person point of view, I believe. I like moments of the story, but I think just what this book stands for and the overall feeling it's just not for me. I am going to finish it because I'm not hating it, I'm not loathing it, and I do want to see what happens to our main character. I do kind of want to see her triumphant girl boss moment, okay, I do, but I'm not happy about it, and I don't like that feeling. I have no idea what to rate this book. I didn't enjoy it. I actually feel like the latter half of this book was worse than the beginning half of this book. I don't feel like it went in a direction that was particularly interesting or compelling, and I don't really feel like our heroine had a girl boss moment. If anything, the ending of this book really focused more on her love interest and sort of like his heritage. And it's like, why are we making a book about a powerful woman and making the most important plot line basically in the story about the guy that she got with? You know what? Now that I say it out loud, I feel very solidified in my opinion of this book, and I think I'm gonna give it 2 stars. I was between 2 and 3 stars because I was like, I know this is just not my kind of book, and so it's never gonna get a 4 or 5 star from me, but it's fine. It's a fine book. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, it's not really a fine book. It's not a book that I feel like has a compelling message, which is what a lot of historical fiction goes for. It's not a book that was particularly compelling. I feel like it did have some interesting, like, magical elements that, like, nothing really came of that, like the dog seemingly understanding English. I didn't feel like the daughter was utilized very well either. Like, there is a whole side character, a whole daughter in this story, and nothing important happens to her. Nothing interesting happens. She is just used to further the plotline of the father. I don't want to rail on about this book. I respect everyone who likes this book. I need to make that very clear. I feel like that's something that I want to make clear, just generally speaking, because I think maybe sometimes it is unclear here on my channel. I respect people who enjoy whatever. I also respect authors for writing what is important and true to them, right? I think obviously this book has a lot of love and enjoyment and passion behind it. It was one of those books that like Barnes & Noble is really pushing at us. I think it's like Barnes & Noble's book of the year or something like that. So clearly there's something here that I'm just simply not seeing, but I think it really comes down to this not being my kind of book and this being, in my opinion, a fairly weak representation of historical fiction. The writing and syntax was fine, right? Like the plotting was fine. I just didn't really like anything else. Let's move on to a book that I'm actually enjoying. A book that I knew I would enjoy. Funny Feelings by Tara DeWitt. This book is much more my speed, which I'm not shocked by. I was able actually to find an audiobook copy of this book from Hoopla, though I don't think I'm going to continue listening to this as an audiobook. I'm 30% in, and I know enough about the story at this point that I feel like I can kind of adequately tell you what it's about. It's about our main character, Farley. She is a stand-up comedian, an aspiring stand-up comedian. She's not like super fresh in her career, but she's definitely kind of on the rise, and she is managed by a guy named Myers. We find out pretty quickly that both of them have an attraction towards each other, that neither of them is really willing to acknowledge to the other person or like let the other person know that they like each other. Farley has kind of always had a thing for him. She thinks he's really handsome. She really likes his kid who is deaf, I believe, and he has always had an attraction to her, but one day he, on a whim, decides to represent Farley, as management, and in a way it's actually sort of to protect her. We get to kind of like hear about what happened. I don't think that it was like a really terrible situation, but basically he kind of makes a snap decision to manage her. He has to kind of put aside his feelings for her. He is not like shared with her so that he can be her management and also like not abuse a position of power. And I don't think he's like considerably older than her or anything, maybe just a little bit. But at the beginning of the story, we find out that they're going to have to fake date because our heroine is going to be going on a comedy tour to kind of generate buzz and press on this tour. She's going to be opening for some like more famous female comedians. She needs to have like a love life that people can speculate about. I feel like that's a pretty good setup for a fake dating situation. It kind of makes sense to me. And already like Farley is really leaning into it. I think they're like date at the movies or something like that. She like sits in his lap and like she asks, is this okay? And he's like, yeah, like you're really taking this, whole fake dating thing seriously. He is, secretly very into it. So I'm wondering how long it'll go on before they admit their feelings to each other. Like right off the bat, I think that the story is really well crafted. We already know so much about the characters' backstories and their pasts. We do get to see again how they like met and how he became her manager. I really like the little insights we're getting about family, right? Her mom was really important to her. Her mom was someone that died, I guess, maybe semi-recently, and I think his mom also died. I could be wrong here. Maybe I'm like literally thinking about lessons in chemistry. Everybody has dead parents, I guess, is really the gist. Feel like though, not that the audiobook's bad, I think I'm gonna pick up a physical copy of it. For some reason, and I know this is kind of a random distinction, indie romances almost always work better for me flipping the page myself. I don't know what it is. It's not like they're like, poorly written or much different than traditionally published romances, but for some reason the voices just like don't work for me and I need to read it in my own voice, in my own head. So I'm gonna switch over to the Kindle version and finish this book tonight. I'll let you know my feelings bright and early tomorrow morning, and then we can get started on notes on an execution, which I think is going to be my next one. It's fairly late. I'm actually about to go downstairs and put on my pajamas, but I just finished Funny Feelings. I thought that I'd let you know that I did enjoy it and that this is the first book that I feel like I have thoroughly enjoyed, and that feels good to say because this video has been a ride. It really has been. I think the thing I want to say up front about this book is that I don't know if it like wasn't the right time for me to read this book or what, but I feel like I was missing something, which is not to say again that I didn't enjoy it, because I did, but I feel like this is a book that I need to reread at kind of a different point because there was something about the way it was like kind of slow moving and kind of cozy that like didn't totally work for me. I think I wanted something a little bit more like angsty, and this was definitely very, very low angst. There's not really much to say in terms of how the plot develops because this book's really not about the plot. We do have a comedian heroine. We do have a hero who's like helping her out in her career. We do have, I guess, the relationship between Farley and Myers' kid, like Hazel. She's a really sweet gal. They have a cute little relationship. But honestly, the book was really not a grand thing. And I think that's kind of nice sometimes. I think it's sometimes nice to have a cozy romance that just feels really charming. And this one was really, really charming. So I'm not mad at it. I had a good time with this one. I am really impressed with this book because I believe, and I could be wrong here, I think this is this author's first book. If it's not, I think it's her second book. So this one is definitely really impressive, I think, on a writing craft level. Only real complaint I would say that I had with the book is that that I feel like the third act conflict was a little bit weak, and I sort of feel like the reasons that these two didn't get together sooner were kind of silly. Not silly necessarily, but I think I wanted there to be more of a conflict there than just these two working through their own emotional baggage, if we even want to call that the reason that they couldn't get together earlier. So that like kind of bugged me a little bit. But that being said, I liked it. It was sweet. It was charming. I do think that Meyer is a really delightful hero, just very understanding and calm, but also like really sexy. So yeah, I had a fun time with this. 4 stars for sure. I think maybe upon reread it could be a 5-star read. I feel like I need to give it a second chance or a second go. I think I'm gonna go downstairs like I just said and put on my PJs, and I'm gonna let you know how I feel or how I'm feeling about Notes on an Execution. This book is one that I initially couldn't decide if I loved or hated. Initially, I will say I was very turned off by this book because I'm sorry, I'm not into the gruesome and the macabre. It's just like not really for me. I have more of a distaste for these sorts of books, or books that kind of push the envelope, I guess, in certain ways, or just really graphic depictions of things. And I feel like it's been getting worse over the years. I feel like I'm just a fuddy-duddy old lady and I like happy books, okay? But this one is interesting because it's a more literary take on a thriller, I guess you could say. True crime story. I don't really know what to call this. It's not much of a thriller because we know what happens. It essentially details the life and trials, I guess you could say, of our main character Ansel, and he and his points of view are told in the second person, so he is like talking to you as if you were in his shoes, I suppose. He is on death row. He's going to be executed for crimes that he committed when he was younger, I believe like in his 20s or teenage year or something like that. He murdered a few women and he was caught, so he is going to be executed for this. But interwoven with his plotline and with his story, we get the stories of women throughout his life. We get the story of his mother and kind of the things that she had to do to survive her life. We get insights into the twin sister of Ansel's wife. We also get the point of view of a woman named Safi, short for Saffron, and she is the investigator, I guess you could say, on this case, the detective who really believes Ansel did it, and she's the one that's really like saying, hey, we need to go after this guy even when maybe some of the evidence isn't necessarily leading towards him. Definitely an interesting book. I think early on we're kind of only getting the points of view of like a young person and Ansel and also Ansel's mom, and it was just a lot for me, I will say. This book does not pull any punches. It's definitely giving you graphic on-page depictions of domestic abuse, animal torture, amongst other things, like basically anything you think of. It's pretty much on page, and it was really challenging for me because I was just not really in that sort of headspace today. I was not really feeling like, hey, I want to like hear about a serial killer and get in his mind. Like that just really wasn't me, and often it's not me. Something is so compelling about the way that this story again splits between Ansel's point of view and all of these other women, and I'm really enjoying Safi's point of view, which I think is kind of an unpopular opinion. I think a lot of people don't like the whole female detective outline. It's like too crime drama or whatever, like not for them. I like it. That's what's keeping me invested in this story. I'm liking this approach. I think if you're going to tell this kind of story, I think I appreciate it in more of a literary sense than I ever could in a mystery thriller context. I think that this isn't like some Karen Slaughter attempt at like going big or going home. This is definitely something that I think is trying to say something deeper and maybe is going to speak to, I don't know, maybe toxic masculinity a little bit. I mean, I can't imagine that you would have 3 female points of view interspersed with a murderer's, like a guy who really hates women, interspersed with his point of view, if you weren't going to try to make that at some point in the book, if that makes sense. I think I'm enjoying it. I think I'm maybe not enjoying it, but I am compelled to continue reading. I want to know what happens next. Will not be able to sleep until I finish this, both because it returns to my library quite soon and also because my brain won't let me go to sleep without finishing this. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and I will get back to you bright and early on my final thoughts and feelings, and hopefully I will have another like glowing review for you like I did for Funny Feelings. You know, I'm gonna give credit where it's due. This book certainly aroused feelings in me. Sadly, those were not positive ones. I fucking hated this book. You know what's upsetting me the most is the fact that I purchased I purchased 2 books specifically for this video, and I strongly disliked both of those. Why did I have to buy those ones instead of the other ones? It's beyond me. It's so entirely frustrating when you can see what an author's attempting to do, when you just don't appreciate the execution of those things, for lack of a better word. Okay, let me try to articulate what I don't like. It's going to be challenging for me because I think my feelings and my thoughts are kind of swirling around at this point, but here's what I have to say. I think this book, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I looked at other reviews to see what people's thoughts and feelings were, how people were interpreting this book, to kind of see if I'm just missing something, right? I think this book was attempting to be commentary on the death penalty, commentary on how murder is never justified and that men's reasons for killing women don't matter. We're supposed to not care at all about the guy that did the killing. We're supposed to care there about these women and what their lives could have been. And I know that that latter one is definitely something that our author was trying for, because the last part of this book, we have her kind of making up a possible what if scenario on, if, you know, the women who weren't murdered, this is what their lives would have looked like, and this is how they could have changed the world. And here's the thing, all of that is fine and great, but the way that this book sets out to do those things completely fucking failed, in my personal opinion. Here's my issue with it. By not giving the guy a motive, by not giving this guy a motive, by having him just kill women, I think it gives you room to speculate. I think it gives you room to sympathize with him as a character. And okay, maybe that was part of the thing. Like, you're supposed to sympathize with him a little bit and then question why you're sympathizing. I don't know. Irritated me that he didn't have a strong motive that we could hate, right? In attempting to tell us that motives don't matter and that there's never like a justified reason for men's violence, you were letting us fill in the blanks ourselves. It's hard to hate this guy when we don't know why he even did this in the first place. He's like, I don't know. I had to do it. And you almost feel sympathy for him because you didn't say, oh, he hates women. I mean, I guess it's maybe assumed, but that irritated me right off the bat. Also, I don't know how this book is supposed to be telling us that the death penalty is never deserved. I don't believe in the death penalty, okay? Like, I'm just gonna put that out there. That's not something I believe in. But I don't think this book really helped prove that point. I don't think that the women's points of view were strong enough to counteract the point of view of the murderer. I'm losing steam here. I really am. I just fucking hated this book. I genuinely loathed it. I thought it was terrible. I wanted to enjoy it because at the beginning I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be interesting. It's going to be introspective. It's also going to be like justice. And it didn't feel like that at all. It didn't feel triumphant. And maybe it's not supposed to. I mean, I'm not saying that this needed to be like a rah-rah girl boss moment, but I just really hoped that there would have been a better job done at telling this story. And beyond all of that, like beyond the moral message and the way that I don't think this book says what it thinks it's saying, I was bored. For a good portion of this book, I was quite bored. I feel like this could have been told in a way that made things more exciting, and I can't really speculate on like what those things would have been. I think maybe if we had gotten, I don't know, closer to the people whose points of view we were getting, like closer to the women, I think maybe it would have landed a little bit harder for me, would have been more impactful. I feel like I'm not making a very strong case for why this book didn't work, but I think I'm going to stick by the 2 other under 3-star reviews that I found on Goodreads and just say that I really didn't fucking like this book. I really, really didn't. I think if you're looking for something exciting and thrilling, you're definitely not going to find it here if you're a mystery thriller girly. And I think if you're looking for really good, interesting commentary, a nuanced commentary on the death penalty, on men, on violence, I don't think you're going to find it here, frankly. I just don't, I must be missing the message, but I just don't think this book did what it wanted to do. I'm giving this book 1 star. I hated this. I'm going to be immediately unhauling this along with Lessons in Chemistry, which is behind me. I don't actually know if you can see it. I'm going to release the rage now. I felt this last night before I went to sleep, actually, and Hayden was like, are you okay? And I tried to explain this book to him, and he was like, wow, yeah, you feel really passionately about this. I get that. Feelings and thoughts. I'm going to release that energy. I'm going to instead bring in good energy, and I'm going to read Legends and Lattes because I think that's the escape that I need after this bullshit. Legends and Lattes is much, much better, in my humble opinion, than Notes on an Execution. I'm halfway through this one. I have been casually listening to this casual book for the past, like, hour or so. It's definitely a short audiobook, and I definitely think the audiobook is the way to consume this story. I didn't realize this, but the author is an audiobook narrator, and he does a fantastic job at narrating his own book. It is just really delightful and cozy and slice of life, like everybody told me that it would be. This book is about our main character, Viv. She is an orc, historically or in the past has, I guess, done orc shit. She has been, going to war and fighting people and just has had a hard life. And she wants to kind of get out of that and open up her own coffee shop. And coffee is kind of a new thing that not a lot of people know about. And so she decides to enlist help of some townspeople in this town she settles in to help her open up the coffee shop of her dreams. She ends up working with a succubus, a ratkin, I believe, and some other dude. I don't actually know if he's human or what, but he's the one that kind of does the construction. And I believe an old barn that Viv ends up using for her coffee shop. And so far we have had some interactions between Viv and the townspeople, Viv and some of the people that are helping her obviously in her coffee shop. It's been nice. I don't really know what to say about this book. It's not a book that I think requires a lot of thought, and I don't mean that in a mean way. I think sometimes it's nice to just sink into a book and feel surrounded by the atmosphere and the cozy vibes. Like, that's totally what this book's going for, and I'm definitely thinking it accomplishes that. The only thing I don't like, there's really nothing that I dislike about this story. I don't think this is really my preferred kind of fantasy. If I'm gonna pick a fantasy up, it's not that I need it to be grimdark. I'm definitely not a grimdark girly, but I think I prefer just like your typical epic epic high fantasy. You know, I sometimes like a paranormal from time to time too, like a paranormal romance, but cozy is not really what I'm looking for necessarily in a fantasy book. I'm typically looking for that in my romances. So I think there is going to be a romantic element to this story, at least I think so. And I think this is going to be a series as well. So like maybe there will be some like full-length books later on down the road that will be more perfectly suited to me. But that being said, I'm glad that I'm reading this. I don't think I would have picked it up had it not been for this video. And it's just nice to see what the hype is about for a book that I know is so beloved by so many different people. Not gonna ramble anymore. I'm just gonna go ahead and finish this one off and let you know my final thoughts and feelings. So I neglected to film a final clip for Legends and Lattes, but I wanted to just pop in here and give you my final thoughts and feelings, which is that this book was a delight. It was so fun to listen to. It was cozy, it was charming, and I definitely think this book is deserving of the hype. Was this a 5-star, like blow me away kind of story? No, but I don't think it needed to be. I gave this book 4 stars, and it's one that I think I could see myself revisiting later on, checking out for my library when I just need something like cozy to listen to. I know I said that like I'm not totally into cozy fantasies, and I do stand by that, but something about this book just really spoke to me, and I do think the audiobook listening experience was the way to go here. I think that definitely made this book what it was. It was charming, it was delightful. I think I understand why people really like this one, and I think of all of the books that I'm reading for this video so far, this is probably my favorite. So 4 stars, moving on. Delirious, but ready to talk about tomorrow. Okay, I'm 50% into this book, actually a little over 50% in. I think I'm liking it. This book is not necessarily what I expected, and yet it's also exactly what I expected. I didn't know anything about this book going in. This book is about video games. It's about pain and disability a little bit. It is about friendship, I guess, long-term friendship over the years. This book follows our 2 main characters, Sam and Sadie, I believe. For some reason in my head I always want to say Sloane, but I'm pretty sure it's Sam and Sadie. Sam is half Korean American, half American. He's mixed, and that's like a part of his identity and something that comes up in the book. He also got in a bad car accident. Foot is a kind of recurring issue in the book. At the very beginning of the book, Sam is in the hospital kind of dealing with this foot that has been basically like crushed and is getting, I guess, rehabilitated, and he's having some like psychological problems, I guess. He's like not very vocal. He doesn't really want to talk to anyone, and he meets Sadie one day in the hospital and they strike up a friendship. Little does he know that this friendship is not exactly what he imagined it would be. She was actually getting like community service credit, I guess, for being his friend, even though she didn't really think of it as bad at the time, and she like really felt like he was her friend. There were issues there, right? They bonded over video games, and over their lives, they've kind of like come back together, started building video games together and like connecting in that way and developing a stronger bond of friendship over the years. And it's interesting. I don't think that really does this book enough justice, frankly. It's like trying to say that like Ready Player One is just a video game sort of story, or that An Absolutely Remarkable Thing is just about robots. Like that's not really what the stories are about. That's just kind of what the plot is, and you know, kind of buries, I guess, the greater messages. Also, I don't feel like I've actually gotten to the greater messages in this story yet. At this point, Sam and Sadie are actually like fairly far in their video game making careers. They are working together, they have a successful business, they have a friend that works with them, and we're kind of seeing the trials and tribulations of life kind of affect both of them as they kind of grow up and grow together, and their friendship kind of goes through stages. It's like they grow closer together and then they kind of expand out and like aren't as close, and then they come back together. And at the part that I'm at right now, they've kind of like, I guess, been in their own separate bubbles because of their own things going on. They're definitely both very individual characters that feel really real and realized. I think Sadie is someone who I don't necessarily 100% relate to, but I definitely understand as a character, and Sam is someone I just sympathize with and think is really interesting. Wow, I am losing both camera battery and SD card, but I think, liking this book. I don't think that I'm fully understanding it yet, but I'm hoping that by the time that I finish this book, I understand more about what this book is trying to say. I don't know if it's just commentary on friendship and like platonic love, or if it goes deeper than that, or if it talks about how creation and like, you know, making video games together is something beyond what I think it is. I'm not entirely sure, but I think I'm having a good time. It's a totally pleasant listening experience. That the author really knows her characters, and I think it's overall enjoyable. Do I think this is deserving of a ton of awards? At this point, no. I'm not finished with it, and maybe there are going to be some like transformative things that happen, but I'm gonna find that out for myself, and I'll get back to you. I finished tomorrow, and tomorrow. I didn't like it. Listen up, this was not terrible, but I just am really failing to see what people like about this one in the same way that I failed to see what people like about. I really don't understand why people like Notes on a execution. This book I can kind of understand why people like it, right? So in the last clip, I was saying that I was kind of enjoying it and I was liking the relationship that was unfolding between Sam and Sadie. I thought it was an interesting friendship and I don't feel like it really went anywhere. Like the first part of the story I thought was interesting and I was excited to see things unfold. I was excited to see this like raw, emotional, insightful story set on a backdrop of video games, but really just about, you know, human connection and real life stuff. I just feel like the things that happen in this book felt a little bit cliche, and I don't think that our characters really grew very much, which was kind of upsetting. I also feel like there was a lot of tell and not a lot of show. So basically the story in terms of plot is Sam and Sadie as children making video games together or playing video games together. They meet up again in college. They make a video game together, or I guess Sadie makes a video game and he gives her criticism on it, and then I guess post-grad they decide to make video games together. They embark on this friendship and this like co-working experience together. It's strange for a story of this length, I guess, to not focus for longer periods of time on these moments of their life, right? You'll have them working on a really pivotal, important video game for them, something that challenges them emotionally, intellectually, challenges their friendship. We don't spend very much time on that. We spend a little bit of time them kind of maybe arguing about something, and then we move on to the next video game 5 years later, and then we move on to Sadie getting into a new relationship. We move on to Sam having his health issues flare up again. We have just moments and moments and moments happening, and I guess maybe that's why it's called Tomorrow, I'm not sure. But to me, I never felt like we spent enough time in a given moment to really feel close to the characters for any of the emotional threads to really hit and to resonate, which was frustrating because I could tell that these characters were really real. Like they felt so real to me. I was frustrated by them often. I loved Sam. Sadie was not my fave, but they felt like real people, and so I wanted to care for them more and I wanted to be frustrated by them but like really deeply feel them, but I didn't feel like that was the case. And as the story carried on, the friendship between Sam and Sadie, I think a lot of people say like, oh, it evolves over time and it's so beautiful, and I just don't see it. I feel like Sadie kind of abandoned Sam near the end of this book, and I felt like her reasoning for never entering into a romantic relationship with Sam was very weak. And I'm not saying they needed to be in a romantic relationship, but I think she says some throwaway line like, lovers are not a big deal, or lovers are just whatever, but our friendship is so much deeper than that. And I was like, how is it deeper than that if you abandoned this man for 5 years? This book was incredibly frustrating to me. It was a fun read. Fun maybe is the wrong word. It was enjoyable enough read. I think there were moments of emotional resonance. I will say Sam, like I said, was an interesting character. I liked seeing him, his growth, and him kind of coming into himself, but I wish we could have seen more moments of that. We do get some hints that he does grow into himself. He becomes sort of the marketing piece of the company, sort of the mouthpiece for this video game company, and he gains confidence and he, I think, starts working out and like gets tattoos and stuff, and he just becomes a guy that like he's proud of. And we see that for a second, but we don't get to see like what led to that. I didn't hate this book, but I feel like it didn't have the emotional impact that I wanted it to have, and I think I'm failing to see why people are so strongly attached to this story. I think part of it's that I am not a literary fiction person. I tend not to pick up stories like this and totally love them like everybody else does, but I do think this was just lacking from a storycraft perspective. I really think that this book needed to be over a shorter period of time. I think there needed to be more moments of sitting with the emotions and sitting with the feelings of the characters. I wanted there to be more dialogue. It was just frustrating to me. This is definitely a 3-star read for me. I am questioning this video at this point though, because I have not had a single 5-star read, and this did not happen to me last year. I had multiple 5-star reads amongst y'all's favorites, and I don't think like my viewer demographic has changed very much over the past year, so I don't really know what's happening. You know, you win some, you lose some. Though I will say, admittedly, this has been a lot more challenging to get through than it was last year. I mean, makes sense. The books are not to my liking, sadly. That being said, I did start a book that I am actually really enjoying, and I think actually has the potential to be a 5-star read given how I'm enjoying it. So let's go ahead and talk about A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This is a wild card pick for me, and I think maybe that is the theme of these videos. I think I've only done like 2.5 at this point, right? I did like a mini version of this, I think in 2021. I did like a more official version of this in the beginning of 2022. And in last year's video, the one that I remember most vividly, I read Project Hail Mary by whatever his name is. Didn't expect to like it at all, gave it 5 stars, was one of my favorite books that I read last year. This, a YA thriller, I certainly was not expecting to be a book that I was going to thoroughly enjoy. So this book's about a main character, Pip, I think short for Pippa, and she is embarking on a journey, a school journey, I guess, a school project journey, to figure out what happened 5 years ago to someone who used to attend her school that went missing and is presumed dead, I guess. This girl named Andy, she was 17, got really blown up that her boyfriend killed her. Her boyfriend is no longer around to tell us what happened because he unfortunately took his own life. We're not sure if he actually had something to do with her disappearance. We don't know what happened to her, if she disappeared, if she died, but everybody is pretty much convinced that her boyfriend Sal was the one that did it, and Pip doesn't really think this is true because she knew Sal personally. Sal Sal was a friend of her best friend's older sister, and so she kind of like in passing kind of grew up with this guy, and she really has fond memories of him. And so she connects with his brother Ravi, I believe, who's a little bit younger than him. She's like, hey, can I get an interview from you? And then he's like, you know, after he finds out what she's doing, he's like, okay, I've kind of always suspected my brother didn't do this either. Let me help you out with this investigation. And so the book is told in like part interviews, part little like investigative clips or like maps and things, and then part like narrative, because it's a YA story and we do get to see our main character like interact with her friends and do other things. It is just so well plotted in the sense that we are getting clues as the story is unfolding. Thank fuck. When's the last time I read a mystery that had clues? It shouldn't be that unheard of, you know? It shouldn't. But a YA mystery bringing in the clues. We love to see it, okay? So we're getting clues along the way from people that knew Sal and people that knew Andy, and I am just enthralled. Not only are we getting all of these clues laid out before us, plotting is excellent. I have not been bored a single second. The plot doesn't let up, even when we have the moments of our heroine like hanging out with friends. It all comes back to the main plot of the story, the main reason that the story exists, right? That Pip is trying to figure out what happened to Sal and Andy. And it's just fucking good. It's just a good time. I don't care if it's serious. I don't care if the ending is terrible, but I am just interested to see what happens next. And I don't think I have been this engrossed in a story in a really long time. I haven't even looked at my phone. That's the main thing for me. If I'm not getting on TikTok every like, I don't know, chapter or so, that's how you know that I'm having a good time. I don't know if this is going to be like the most incredible story I've ever read, but I don't care at this point. I'm just looking for a good fucking time, especially since tomorrow to read this. I actually did start this today. I'm only like a tiny bit in. I don't even know if you can see. I'm actually liking it. I think this will actually be something that I end up enjoying. At least freaking hope so, because I'm going to be spending like multiple hours on this since it's 540 pages. But that's neither here nor there at the moment. I am going to finish this book up and hopefully have something good to report to you. Okay, so I finished A Good Girl's Guide to Murder late last night. No, it was early this morning. I just couldn't put this book down. It was so freaking good. Gave it 5 stars. This is probably the only book I'm going to give 5 stars in this video, which is wild. Wonders will never cease here on this channel. This was such a delight from start to finish. I loved every moment of it. You're getting clues throughout the story. The plot never stops. It is breakneck, in my opinion, the entire time you're reading. I read a couple of Goodreads reviews from my friends. I actually watched Elias, his review as well for this book. I think he hated this one and really hated the main character. And I guess I get it. I will say, like, if there is one critique of this book, it is that it's not necessarily a super realistic mystery thriller. Tend to not care so much about that aspect of it. It's definitely not realistic in that, well, no, I think it is realistic. I take that back. The heroine in this story makes some really stupid decisions. She goes out on her own a lot during her investigations instead of, I don't know, like seeking help from the police or like seeking help from a friend. She just goes into these situations being kind of stupid, but also she's a senior in high school. Are you really expecting her to be someone who, I don't know, has like the totally formed prefrontal cortex? Like, no. But I didn't need it from her because it was just so good. I don't know. Like, what is there to say about this besides I thought it was really, really good. I liked the way that this book ended. It felt like all of the clues really led us there. I liked the twist at the end that kept this from being too predictable, and I liked the way the twist went. I thought it was going to go into totally unrealistic territory, but it didn't. This was good, okay? This was good. Thank you for making me read this. I did own it already. My sister actually told me that she really enjoyed this. Maybe the lesson is to listen to my sister and not my subscribers? I don't know. I don't know if there's like a really big lesson to be gleaned from this, but I fucking love this book. I think if you want a good mystery thriller and you're someone who maybe doesn't read a ton of them, I think this would be a good one to pick up because it's just a good time. It's fun. It is so fun. But let's move on to a book that I didn't have fun with, so then I can tell you about Babel, okay? Because I have started Babel. I'm like 50% in. By some fucking miracle, I've been listening to this book nearly all day, and I do hope to finish it. So first, let's talk about Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. Goodness, this is a book that I just don't really know how to talk about, and I think that's why I put off talking about it for so long into this video, because it's actually the first book that I finished. This book's about our main character, Dora, short for Theodora. At the beginning of the story, she kind of comes into contact with a member of the Fae or something like that, and she no longer has a lot of emotion. She doesn't experience shame or embarrassment, and this makes it particularly tricky for her in high society. So this is set in, I believe, Regency England. She's kind of getting to her spinster age, but her friend is like on the dating market. I guess she's been like taken in by this family, and so she feels kind of out of place because, you know, she doesn't have all of the social graces, I guess, of her friend, and also her friend's mom's kind of an asshole. So, you know, you kind of sympathize with her at the beginning of the story, and you're curious as to where things are going to go. We also find out really early on that there is a magician. What do they call him? Let me see. No, the Lord's Sorcier, who I guess knows a bit about the Fae and knows a bit about magic, and he becomes the love interest of the story, if that's not like already abundantly clear for me just talking about it. The story is like part, I guess you could say, like Regency tale. We've got Theodora and her friend, I guess kind of like trying to win the attentions of certain guys, and like Dora is supposed to distract someone so that her friend can get with someone. That's a big part of the story. Then also the Lord Sorcerer or whatever is trying to help Dora figure out the rest of her emotions went and if she can gain back the other half of her soul. Get it? Half a soul? On paper, it sounds great. On paper, it sounds exciting. But I felt like it was not very exciting. It was really boring. And I guess some people are framing that as cozy and like charming. I didn't really find it to be the case. I felt like the romantic thread here was very, very lacking. And I felt like the Regency component of it, the sort of like historical romance aspect of it, wasn't very good. I didn't feel like there was like particularly witty banter. I didn't feel like Theodora's like friendship was that great either. Basically nothing about this book impressed me and it was really boring. Not surprised. I don't really like stories like this. This reminds me a bit of, what is it? The Gentlewomen Witches, League of Gentlewomen Witches. Historical romance, historical fiction, fantasy books are not my thing. I have figured out that like particular rare subgenre is not for me. I'm glad that these books exist though, because clearly this is something that other people really seem to enjoy. I just fail to see sort of excitement in it. I think generally speaking, I'm not like a mishmash of genres kind of girl. I was actually talking about this on a live show yesterday. I don't really like fantasy romance very much because I don't really feel like either aspect is done particularly well in most fantasy romances. It's like be a fantasy or be a romance. You know, unless you're Sarah J. Maas and are somehow able to pull it off, it just doesn't usually work. So this was just never gonna work for me. I did not rate this on Goodreads, but I would give this 2 stars. Let's move on to talk about Babel. The last book that I'm reading for this video. Are y'all tired of this yet? I'm a little bit tired of this. Let's talk about Babel. This book is about colonialism. It is about knowledge and power, and I guess who gets to be in charge of both of those things. It's about our main character, Robin, who is taken from his home in China to England. And because he has, I guess, a mastery of 3 different languages at this point, Cantonese, Mandarin, and English, he is a good candidate to go to Oxford and to work on silver, I guess you could say, in the Tower of Babel. You find out throughout the course of the story what exactly this entails, what the consequences and repercussions are, not only for Robin as a character and Robin as a foreigner, I guess you'd say, in the United Kingdom, but also the repercussions for the countries who don't have the power of silver. Basically, silver is magically imbued, I guess, by different foreign languages. So whoever has, like, I guess the most mastery of foreign languages, whoever's like completely fluent, you know, however many foreign languages are most able, I guess, to use silver to create magic. I'm not doing a good job at explaining this, but it's kind of confusing, I guess, to read about in a way. It's not like inaccessible, I will say. This is not like an inaccessible book, but this definitely reads like historical fiction. You know how I feel about historical fiction. That being said, I love R.F. Kuang's writing. I read The Poppy War and really enjoyed it. I think I gave that book 4 or 5 stars, and this one is pretty good as well. I think my issue with this book, and I think it's an issue that a couple of people have had that I've seen, a few detractors from the story, that I think some of the themes, perhaps a little bit heavy-handed in the story, right? I think I read a review that said something like, if you had no idea what colonialism was, this would be an excellent like primer on it. And I do think at times this book does read a little bit heavy-handed with those particular themes. It's like, we'll have something new introduced into the story and it's just another like metaphor for colonialism. I'm not mad at it, but I do wish that some elements of the plot were not necessarily so blatantly tied to this theme of colonialism, right? I wish there were just more intriguing moments throughout the book. I think that's kind of what I'm struggling with, and I'm not totally struggling with the story. I'm having a fine time with it. We're kind of plodding along, seeing Robin's development at Oxford, seeing him get in with friends, and also have to deal with students who aren't part of the Tower of Babel. And so it feels just a little bit bland, I guess you could say. Not bland, but like uninteresting, unexciting in ways. Like, yes, these kids are, I guess, learning how to turn silver into something that like can have magical properties that can like do certain things for certain people, but I'm not that intrigued by it. Like, I wanted more from it. I wanted to see, I guess, more from the magic system of this world, and I know that that's not the point of it. I think it would make for a more intriguing story. It seems like our author like went in wanting to prove a certain point and wanting to like put forth certain ideals, and then she tried to build a story around that, and it feels like the story is really built around that rather than having like a story with these things kind of like woven in as these truths that are not necessarily spoon-fed to us. And I feel like I'm being hypercritical. I'm not trying to be. I just think that from a listening perspective, from a reading perspective, I am listening to the audiobooks so I can like get things done around my house, because holy shit, this book's like 500 pages long. I just wish that I guess, again, like the story part was more intriguing. I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion. Obviously, she's incredibly talented. I think she is saying very important and interesting things through this book, but I just wish that the plotline of this book were a little bit more exciting and more interesting. But maybe we're heading in a more exciting direction from this 50% mark on. Something kind of pivotal happens at that 50% mark with our main character Robin and with his, I'm gonna say tutor, no, his guardian. So I'm curious to see, what's gonna happen, but I also feel like the story is really heading in a direction, it's like, okay, I guess something happened and now we're moving this way. It just doesn't feel, I guess, particularly grand and exciting. So I am going to finish this book sometime today, and I will come back to you tomorrow morning with the intro of this video and also with my final thoughts on this book and this video in general. I'm sure you can guess my thoughts and feelings, on this video, but try to articulate them tomorrow as well, along with my final thoughts on this book. Babel, final clip, take 2. I cannot find a good way to talk about this book. I'm torn. I'm struggling. I'm torn. I finished it by some miracle today. That's why this video is going live on a Monday instead of a Sunday. Sorry for that. Okay, I'm just gonna tell you how I feel about this book. I feel like this book is incredibly well crafted. I think R.F. Kuang set out to do something really bold, and I think she did that. I didn't feel like it was a very fun read. And it's not because of the themes that it tackled that it wasn't fun. I think you can include any themes in your book and still have like a fun, interesting, well-paced, well-plotted book to read. And I'm not saying that this book wasn't any of those things. I just think for me, again, like I was saying in the last clip, I wanted there to be a little bit more in terms of like the fantasy elements of the story. I wanted there to be some more lighthearted moments that didn't feel like glazed over. It's not that, again, like she didn't accomplish what she set out to do, because she did, and I can't fault her for that. It's just that I personally, as a reader, tend not to like books that have heavy-handed messages, regardless of what those messages are, regardless of if I agree with those messages. I definitely understand and agree with the themes and the messages that she was trying to get across. I think I just wanted more from the magic, and I wanted it to feel fun and propulsive in some parts, and to me, it just felt like any fun was glazed over so quickly just so we could get to these heavier themes. And I don't know, it just like, it's not my kind of read, I think, is really the long and short of it. I think I like books with a little bit more subtlety, a little bit more nuance, and I also like things that are fun and lighthearted. And maybe I need to get over that. Maybe that's something that I need to work on. But I have read books that have harder hitting topics and themes that I just find more interesting. There are books that I think seek to accomplish similar things, maybe with different themes, and yet the way the story is told and the way that the plot drives the story forward is just so much more compelling. So I don't know, I didn't hate this. I thought this was a good book, and I totally understand why this was by and far the most favorite of everyone this year. This book got, I think, like 2 or 3 times the amount of votes as all of the other books, and I am not surprised by it, because I think of all of the books, this is one that was really hyped by a lot of people, and I feel like it's deserving of the hype more so than like a Notes on an Execution or Tomorrow. So I'm not mad at it, but it does feel strange to be giving this the same rating as Tomorrow, because I do think this one is definitely better crafted. But in terms of enjoyment level, which is how I star rate things, is enjoyment, it's just a 3-star read for me. I'm gonna leave it at that. Let's talk about how this video went. This was quite the experience. I felt like quitting so many times. This video also made me question my channel and kind of the direction that I want to be going on my channel. I think it was transformative in some ways. I always like to strike a balance between reading books that I'm really excited about and I really love, and also finding out what other people love and finding out what books are popular in popular culture at any given moment. That's exciting to me. I like to be well read, I guess you could say, to an extent. I like to kind of, dip my toes into other people's favorites, even if it's not always a win. So while this video really pushed me to my limits, I'm glad that I did this. I don't know if I will be doing this next year. It's kind of hard because I really have fond memories of last year's version of this. This year was just so challenging, like emotionally and mentally, to get through. So I guess we'll see what happens. But I can promise you that going forward, there will be, I don't want to say no videos like this in the future, but there are going to be a lot of romance videos where I'm just reading books that I want to read going forward for the rest of the year. Don't get me wrong, there's still going to be list videos, there's still going to be things where I'm kind of like pushing my comfort zone. This year I'm aiming for 55-star reads, that's one of my goals, and you know what? I'm not going to get there by doing a lot more of these kinds of videos. So, mixed feelings, mixed thoughts. I think if any of these books appeal to you, obviously go ahead and pick them up. I don't really have any like bold recommendations from this. I'd love to know in the comments down below your probably conflicting opinions on these books. I love to get different people's perspectives on things, and since I asked y'all for these recommendations, I didn't ask you like why you liked the books, and I would love to know like what about these books spoke to you. What did you love? If you haven't read any of these books, if none of these were on your best of list for this year, let me know in the comments like what your favorite books were, because I'd love to know and see if there's anything that I was just missing, and maybe I'll visit those at some time. But thanks so much for watching this video. If you got through the whole thing, I appreciate you more than you could ever know. I love you so much, and I'll see you next time.